Hello, welcome back to WAKA with Nathan to talk to you about the Optimus Prime Craze of Christmas 1984. Now, what does Prime and Christmas have to do with each other? Well, obviously, Santa wears red and Prime wears or is red. No, I'm kidding. But, you know, Christmas present, I think for a lot of people, the original Optimus Prime from the 80s, Generation 1 Optimus Prime, or even many of the iterations of him since then, has been one of the most meaningful Christmas or birthday presents for a lot of people. I think a lot of people have those memories. And or maybe you had the opposite. Maybe you longed for Prime all of your childhood years and you never got him and now you're bitter. Well, I hope you can take solace in this story, as well as maybe now as an adult you've been able to afford to get Prime. I mean, that's basically what I did. I did actually receive Prime, but this is not the original. This is the replica of the G1, the second issue, and I'll tell you about why it's the second issue in a second. But my friend Benny and I were recently talking, and we both realized that as little kids in 1984, we both got Optimus Prime, and it was the best gift we could get, because it was. I mean, let's go back to 1984. Transformers came along at just the right time to pick up the slack from the year after Star Wars Return of the Jedi had come out, and the toys with Star Wars had kind of started to wane. And Transformers became insanely popular very quickly. But actually getting the original Optimus Prime for Christmas in 1984 as a present was almost like getting Turbo Man in the movie Jingle All the Way with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And that is if your parents didn't get Prime in time. People say that movie was inspired by the Tickle Me Elmo craze of the late 90s and Power Rangers. And honestly, yes, technically, I find it sad that people paid hundreds of dollars for Tickle Me Elmo. But before all that happened, there was the Optimus Prime Christmas craze of 1984. And maybe you don't know much about that. And the reason you probably don't know much about it is because we didn't have the internet to track that at the time it was going on. You couldn't offer someone on the internet to buy Elmo for $800. You had to go, or Prime in this case, you had to go to the stores, look at the catalogs, call the stores, confer with your friends, confer with other parents perhaps, to find Optimus Prime. Now, so let's talk about this. So why the craze? Well, first of all, part of the animated series for the original G1 Transformers, as you know, is one of the best animated series of all time. And along with the movie that came out and everything, and it still holds up as one of the most amazing ones, at least the first couple of seasons. Also, in 1984, little kids, we had advance ads for both the series and the toys months before we were even able to buy them in person. So we were really excited by the time they came out. So by Christmas 1984, no toy was more popular, at least not in the boys' market, than Optimus Prime. I mean, I wanted Optimus Prime! And who wouldn't? He was the greatest hero to that point ever! I mean, can we all just remember that?
Let's roll!
Or remember this? It's so freaking cool, and Prime is still popular. We've had tons of versions of Optimus Prime since the 84 original. But what was stopping me and thousands, millions of other kids from getting Optimus Prime for Christmas in 1984? Well, three things. First of all, the scarcity. Okay, so kind of like in Jingle All the Way, the Turbo Man is basically sold out, and when you can get him, the stores are jacking up prices. The same thing happened to Prime. Not to the crazy level, because again, we didn't have the internet or cell phones to coordinate where the toys were. But by Christmas 84, Transformers were so popular that Prime was sold out in many places. Kind of like, again, Turbo Man. And where you could find Prime, stores started jacking up the prices more than I've ever seen until, obviously, Tickle Me Elmo. Ugh, I can't believe Tickle Me Elmo is the inheritor to the Prime craze. Anyway, the next thing was the cost. Now, I've seen conflicting info on this, but when Prime first came out in 1984, supposedly, he retailed for around $21 to $22. I never saw him for that cheap. In my town, the cheapest Prime ever was at least $25, and often usually a couple of dollars more. And, I always know math. I was a little kid. I didn't know math really well, but I did know when numbers went up and down. And I also knew that getting Prime was risky because the first time I didn't get something I really wanted for Christmas was the previous year, because I asked, of course, for the AT-AT, the all-terrain armored transport from Star Wars, one of the most amazing toys of all time. And I did eventually get an AT-AT, and I'll tell you about that in another video. But at the 1984 or 83, actually, when Return of the Jedi came out, the AT-AT was $50 on sale at the local Best department store. I don't know if anybody remembers the Best department stores, but they used to be around. They've been out of business for like 3 decades now. But so yeah, and my parents said that $50 was out of the question because I was given a budget of around $20 or so for a Christmas present. And mind you, in 1984, ignoring the current inflation, it's just gone really crazy this year. It's, $25 even for Optimus Prime would be like $60 plus. And my parents were middle class, but lower middle class. We still had a black and white TV from the 60s with a turn knob whatever, and with a little dinky antenna. And I felt like an outcast in the neighborhood because no other kid I knew still had a black and white TV, not one that small or that old, but we did. So when I watched, Transformers, all the Transformers were in grayscale. I didn't even know Prime was red. No, I'm kidding. I saw them elsewhere, but so my parents were very generous and very thoughtful, but they just couldn't afford getting us expensive presents, at least at that time, in 1984. Now, the third thing that I think was stopping me, and this happened to a lot of other kids I knew, was my parents, I think, were confused by the Transformer craze, because it came along so fast right after Star Wars. I think, and the reason why I know they were confused is because the first Transformer that I got was a GoBot. Yes. My mom bought me a GoBot, and it's like, here's a Transformer. I'm like, Mom, that's not the same thing. She's like, but look, it's an automobile. It transforms. Like, Mom! Yeah, no. How many of you out there got GoBots when you really wanted Transformers? We should have a Reddit group for that. There probably is one. We should get a support group for that specific childhood trauma, getting a GoBot when you wanted a Transformer. And also, the cartoon, I think my parents hadn't seen it because it aired on Sunday mornings. At least it did in my area, and that was odd because most of the cartoons that I saw were they were after school or on Saturday mornings. So I remember I could only watch it when we were out of town, like at my grandparents' house, or if we were where their church was, a different time of the morning, or at a friend's house. I had a friend who had all the technology. He had an Atari, and he had a VHS. And they recorded the Transformers cartoon, and we got to watch it. I got to watch it there. When I first asked one time my dad if I could skip church as a kid to watch Transformers cartoon, boy, that was the wrong request to make. Dad was like, "What kind of a heathen request is that?" So, and I think also my parents were just confused that I wanted something else instead of Star Wars, because the previous year was all about Star Wars, and that was the first real toy I was crazy about as a kid. Because of my age was Star Wars. And they knew Star Wars. Star Wars was easy. If I'd asked for Star Wars gifts, that would have been a cinch because they love Star Wars too. We went and saw Return of the Jedi like 7 times in the theater. So if I asked for Luke or the Emperor, they knew. And so I think this Transformer thing kind of just took them by surprise. And it took a lot of other parents by surprise too. Another reason I didn't have much hope for getting Prime for Christmas personally was my first trial run of getting a Transformer for my birthday 2 months before Christmas did not go well. One thing I had different for me and the other kids in my circle was my birthday was about 2 months before Christmas at the height of 1984's Transformer craze. And all I asked for that birthday was Transformers. But finding Transformers was already getting difficult 2 months before Christmas. At least the ones you wanted. Yeah, you could find Transformers technically, but they weren't always the ones you wanted. Because let's face it, back in the first G1 release of Transformers, there was like 100 Autobots to choose from and only like 8 Decepticons. Like, whose idea was that? I mean, I'm seriously, go back and look at the original guys. There was like, every variation of car and Jeep and van and truck for the Autobots, but for the Decepticons, it was like the 3 jets, Megatron, Soundwave and his little tapes, and that was it. So they sold out right away. But then, we were in Eckerd's Drugs. Now, I thought I was going to succeed here because we were in Eckerd's Drugs, of all places, which is a Midwest drug chain. I don't know if it's around anymore. It's kind of like CVS today. They actually used to have decent toys sometimes, and they had all GoBots, and except they had one Decepticon jet, and it was Starscream, who was not my favorite Decepticon jet yet. He became my favorite Decepticon jet because of the animated series, and I did eventually get him. This is the original Starscream. Not very big. He's missing a hand here. I've got it somewhere in the back. But Starscream became my favorite jet. Not a very big toy, though. And, oh, by the way, the one I do have that's big, I love, of course, is eventually I got this. The best Starscream ever, as far as I'm concerned. The masterpiece Starscream. And, I mean, he's freaking amazing. Awesome, awesome, awesome. But, back to Eckerd's Drugs. So, the price for Starscream in 1984 was $13.99 in Eckerd's. I think it was like $12.99 in Target. Now, again, $13.99 for my mom was an intimidating price thing to buy as one toy for my birthday in 84. And I got verification on the price. Here's the box for Skywarp I got later. And here is, you can see, $13.99 at Sears. That's like, someone told me that they weren't that expensive. They're like $9.99, the Decepticon jets. I'm like, no, they were $13.99 at a lot of places. Here's the evidence for that. This is the G1 box, too, as you can see from the back. So, $13.99 is basically like $14, which is like $35 back then. So that was a lot. For a small toy, I mean, these toys were made well. They have real metal parts, but they were small. I think my mom, seeing a toy that wasn't that big for the price of my whole birthday present, she was kind of like stunned. I mean, this wasn't like getting the Darth Vader carrier case or anything like that, you know. And she kind of balked at it. It was like, oh, 13, 14 bucks? And I'm like, no, Mom, it's $13.99. Parents love it when you point out technicalities like that. Ooh. I could be a little know-it-all at times back then and today, maybe. But she's like, well, I'll come back later. Maybe it'll be on sale. And I'm like, it's not going to be on sale. And she's like, plus I don't want to get it in front of you because we want to surprise you for your birthday. And I was thinking to myself, I'll be surprised if there's any Transformers at all when you come back to Eckerd's Drugs if you don't grab this thing now. But she didn't get it. So then, though, as my birthday approached, I was depressed because I began to see Transformers disappearing off the shelves so fast. But there was hope because my mom hinted to me that things might be looking in my direction when it came to Transformers. And that's when I mentioned that she got me a GoBot from Eckerd. She went back to Eckerd's Drugs, no more Decepticon jets, so she got me a GoBot, and that's when I explained the difference. So I was alerted that a real Transformer might be happening for my birthday. And sure enough, 1984, my birthday, 2 months before Christmas, I opened a real Transformer! It was Mirage. Yes, the original Mirage, not a GoBot. And then I had 2 presents. And I opened the second present, and it was Mirage. Again, yes, I actually opened Mirage, and then the second present was also Mirage. I'm not making that up. That sounds crazy, but my dad had been traveling, and he grabbed one on the road, and Mom got one home, and I guess they got their wires crossed. They both wrapped them separately, and they didn't realize they got me the same Transformer. And I was depressed. I was like, my parents just don't understand Transformers. They don't, clearly. It's hopeless. But they made it up to me. By the way, I don't want to throw my parents under the bus. My parents, this was a rare thing. They were embarrassed by this. And my parents were usually very clever and good gift givers. They made it up to me by exchanging the Mirage and getting me Wheeljack, who was a very prominent member in the cartoon. Also, one of the hardest ones to put the stickers on, though. Did anyone else experience that? But just because my parents felt bad and made it up to me with Mirage and Wheeljack, that did not mean that I was going to be getting Optimus Prime for Christmas, because it still had a hefty price tag if you could even find it. And as I mentioned, we kids knew what was going on more than our parents did. We had conferences about this. We would talk. We were free-range kids, man. We'd have walkie-talkies and bikes, and we'd be like, all right, Stephen, report. What's the situation at your Target on Optimus Primes? Oh, Nathan, there's only 2 Optimus Primes left in my Target. What? Okay, Devin, what's your situation? Oh, there's none here at Kmart. They're all gone. What are we going to do? Get a hold of yourself, soldier. It'll be okay. We just gotta make sure our parents know how important Optimus Prime is. And that is how it was around Dallas, Texas, at least. There were hardly any Optimus Primes in Target, in Kmart, in Walmart. But then I walked into Montgomery Ward's department store, Montgomery Ward's has been out of business for like 20 years, kind of like Best. But I don't know if anyone remembers Montgomery Ward's. My dad called it Monkey Ward's for some reason. I don't know if that's a common shortened name for Montgomery. If anyone out there is named Montgomery, does anyone call you Monkey for short? That just seems weird. People call it Monkey Ward's. So we're in Montgomery or Monkey Ward's, and there, 2 weeks before Christmas, was Optimus Prime on the shelf. This Optimus Prime, no, the same one, the Generation 1 right there, but for $30, a $5 price increase. And I was like, what? How is that? How is that even legal? Are they allowed to do that? Aren't they supposed to be on the kids' side? And I showed it to my dad, though. Like, here it is. This is the guy I'm telling you about, Optimus Prime. And he was like, wow, $30, Nathan. I was like, but Dad, it's actually here. And he's like, well, Nathan, we'll see if it goes on sale. I'm like, it's not going to go on sale. But my dad asked me all about Prime. He had a lot of questions. And I told him the truth. That Prime was the greatest thing that ever has been or ever will be. And I think my dad believed me. But it didn't mean he was going to buy my Christmas present right there in front of me for $30. Again, $30 now. Now we're talking like almost $80. You know, taking inflation into account. But then like a week later, my dad was on a business trip, now like a week out before Christmas, and I'm all talking about Transformers. He's like, Nathan, I don't want you to get your hopes up for Christmas because I'm just not seeing these Optimus Primes anywhere. And I'm like, I saw them! I saw them in the store! I pointed them out! I tried! So anyway, and by the way, I didn't have any hopes for Santa Claus getting me Optimus Prime because I didn't really believe in Santa Claus, even as a little kid. You might say that's sad and tragic, but my parents just didn't push Santa when I was a kid. We liked watching Santa in movies, and we rooted for people to believe him in movies, but I didn't actually believe him in real life, so I didn't think Santa was going to be able to help me get Prime. Besides, if Santa was real, why didn't I get the AT-AT the previous Christmas? Anyway, so Christmas morning, I was resigned to defeat. I had fought the good fight. I had tried to convince my parents about Prime, but it just wasn't happening. Wasn't going to happen. But you know what? I wasn't totally depressed. Maybe I'll get some more Star Wars stuff. I like Star Wars. My parents pick good gifts anyway. It'll be fine, right? I like music a lot. Maybe they'll get me some records. So imagine my shock when I open up Optimus! Whoop! Optimus Prime! For real! What happened? Santa Claus is real. Apparently, my dad was a lot smarter than I realized. And he realized after the whole kerfuffle over the birthday mix-up with getting double mirages and everything, he must have done his research. Turns out, he got, on one of his business trips, he had got like 2 or 3 weeks earlier, he grabbed an Optimus Prime. I think it was even before I showed him the one in Montgomery Ward's. And he brought it with him home on the plane. Because back then in the 80s, security for airports was terrible. You could bring pretty much anything on a plane, even Optimus Prime. So I could not have been a happier child at that point. The most amazing Christmas I think I've ever had. So we conquered the Prime craze of '84. And by the way, hardly any of my friends got Optimus Prime that Christmas because of their parents just didn't realize how hard it was going to be to get them. If you have a great Christmas Optimus Prime or birthday Optimus Prime story, please share it below in the comments. So please do like this video and hit subscribe if you want more science fiction, Transformers, 80s, geek culture, movie, etc. content here at WAK. I'm Nathan, and I'll catch you all next time.